Mark Morley is still here with us, and we had a great question coming from Lucky Let Him Know, and this needs to be shared with our public.
Go ahead, Luck.
All right, so we are. I noticed that you're in the UK, so I'm not sure how the cannabis industry is over there, but over here, medical dispensaries has popped up everywhere, and you can go to the doctor and tell them that you have anxiety and easily get your medical card. As long as you're 21 and over. All right, so how do you relate that to, what you do? Do you feel like medical cannabis really helps?
It depends how it's taken. So I lost my mother to smoking. It was horrible with lung cancer. So smoking it is not my favorite way of finding to use it. However, there's different ways of using it now, and sometimes it can be very, very beneficial, but there's different rules. We've had some clients who've tried it and it's worked really, really well. It's the same with CBD oil. Some people use it and it works really well, but it doesn't cover up the problem. It doesn't sort the problem. If we've got anxiety, we need to figure out why without spending years of going into it. And although we can cover things up with cannabis or alcohol or different ways of doing it, usually we find for a long-term fix, it's finding out what the problem is and teaching people to control the mental health. And some people will argue that taking cannabis is kind of running away from the problem. But if somebody's got really severe PTSD that can't be fixed with our sort of therapy, that might be a way to help. However, I've got to say we see some people with some severe PTSD that we totally sort out, that the medical sort of guys are saying you can't do that. The other thing is to look at what it does to your mental health long time. If you can take it and you feel absolutely fine, then I've got no problem with that. But some people report that if they use it repeatedly, it does cause further problems. So it's a bit of one of those open questions, and that for some people it can be the right answer, for other people it isn't.
Hey guys, welcome again to another episode of
Men Suffer in Silence.
Today's going to be a great show. We have a special guest today. Roscoe, tell me about our special guest.
All right, so I want to introduce Mark Morley. He happens to be, matter of fact, I'll let him introduce himself. Mark, tell us what you do and who you are.
Okay, so for the last 10 years, I've been working as an anxiety, stress, and depression therapist. The reason why I got into that, I was going to be classed as disabled at 16 with severe anxiety, stress, and depression. And I, rather than go down that disability route, I went off and self-studied and got into NLP, nutrition, hypnosis, and lots of other things. And we've been running our practice helping people for the last 10 years with a team of 3 therapists.
Nice.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Wow.
So let's just jump right into it. As a mental health therapist who specializes in helping men that are alienated from their children, I believe that's what we read on you. How do you see the phenomenon of men suffering in silence manifesting in cases of parental alienation? And what are some of the early signs that loved ones might notice?
Okay, so yeah, parental alienation is becoming quite a big thing over here in the UK. And I've been through it myself. The first thing we see is confusion. You have somebody that's lived with or loved a partner, and that relationship is broken up. And then quite often what happens is the other parent starts abusing the child by not allowing them to spend time with the other parent. And that just causes loads of confusion. When that first happens, we don't know what's going on. But then slowly that moves into sort of stress, anxiety, depression, moodiness. But the first thing we usually see is that people become quite withdrawn because they, first of all, go and speak to their friends and family, and they just don't know how to deal with it. And then they reach out into the court system, and that makes things an awful lot worse. So typically anxiety, where we get up in the morning and we're always feeling nervous, we can't think properly, we start to get depressed, we lose hope in things, and then all sorts of other mental health issues can come in. So it varies from person to person, but it's such a difficult thing to deal with because it's something most of us haven't experienced before.
That's pretty deep. And you know, that seems to be, you know, it's kind of ironic to me that, you know, those are a lot of the same things that are happening here. It's like it's just a thing, unfortunately, when it comes down to it, where it's a universal thing.
It is.
You know?
It is. Well, Mark, so drawing on your experience as a clinical hypnotherapist, what techniques do you use to help men who are suffering in silence break through the subconscious barriers related to expressing their anxiety or their depression?
So the first thing I'd do is I'd sit down with them and I'd look for what's going on in their mind. And this is typically, there's a lot of negative thoughts. They develop things like they're not worth anything, that they've been a failure. So first of all, we need to recognize what's sort of going on there. And then the second thing is we say to them, how do you want to be instead? And of course, the answer we always get is, I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be depressed. But that's a very negative statement, because by saying that, we're focusing on that negative state again. So then we use quite a different set of techniques depending on each client, but typically is when we can determine how they'd rather feel. Instead, to deal with the problem, we'd use something called scan and act. And this is where they'd get up in the morning, they'd scan their system to notice what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what's going on. And then we teach them something called a pattern interrupt. Now, if we look at neuroscience, when we get anxious, stressed, or depressed, we're firing electricity along a neural pathway into the amygdala. And the idea is if we can stop that pattern, it stops it from going on. So typically I'll get somebody to either bring something funny up in their head or a great big stop sign and shout stop as loud as they can. But then the next technique we'd use is something called a positive revive. And this is where we'd go back, we'd go through their history and find out sometimes when they felt happy, calm, relaxed, and in control. And we teach them how to bring that on demand, how to anchor it by pushing a thumb and a finger together and learning to get into that better state. And by repracticing this routine 2 or 3 times a day over 3 or 4 weeks, people can nicely then move into a nice relaxed state to deal with whatever's going on in the best mental state. Because one of the challenges with parental alienation is it really pushes us into that really bad stress state. And that's when we make mistakes. And then we usually use clinical hypnotherapy, which is then taking people into trance and helping to use these tools so that they can switch them on demand. And with practice, this becomes so powerful as it really helps people to control what's going on in the mind.
Wow. That's powerful.
Mark, this is Lucky Let 'Em Know. And I got a question. How does that work, hypnotherapist?
Oh, so hypnosis is a natural state that we go in and out of dozens of times per day. So a good example for most people is they'll get up in the morning and they'll brush their teeth with their dominant hand. And we're doing this unconsciously. It's something we've learned to do when we're young, and we do this all the time. But if you want to have some fun with that, if you try and brush your hand with the non-dominant hand, you're lucky to get to 30 seconds. There'll be blood. You'll get pain in the wrist. So we do some things hypnotically and some things sort of consciously. And the idea of hypnosis is that the therapist creates what we call a psychodynamic loop with the client. We're sitting there watching them. We use hypnotic language to take them down into that trance state, which allows us to get in and make some changes. And it's very relaxing, but it's also very focused. But most importantly, it allows us to get into the unconscious mind to make some changes. And it still scares me, 10 years on, that I can have a client who comes in with a terrible phobia and within half an hour can walk out and be able to pick up spiders or talk with confidence or just stop smoking. So it's a funny state that we don't truly understand yet, but the best way I like to think of it is it allows us to get into that unconscious mind and to rewire the brain. And neuroscience is now telling us that we have these neural pathways, and if we can rewire them and we can do it quickly, we can make changes very quickly.
Wow. That's amazing.
I'm not even gonna lie, Mark. That is amazing because I never thought about it to that point, to where even as simple as you say, brushing your teeth.
Right.
For the last 48 years, I've been doing it with my right hand, and it's just
right.
it's just a thing. I guess you never really think about that you're already kind of under a state,
right?
Already.
I feel like I'm gonna try it tomorrow.
I am too. Yeah.
There's different thoughts on exactly what hypnosis is. And one of the latest ones is that we're always in one hypnotic state or another. You know, it might be that you're playing football or basketball and you're in that state. And then you could jump into the car and turn into a driving hypnosis mental state. And then we've got other ones where we watch the telly, and the telly is very hypnotic. And the big one we're seeing at the moment is you pick up that mobile phone and you get pulled into it and you're just doom scrolling. So we're always in one mental state or another. There's just lots of different words for it. But yeah, try that with brushing your teeth. I've never had anybody do more than 30 seconds with the other hand.
Wow, that is amazing.
My brush got a timer on it.
Yeah,
that's the vibration.
that is amazing. Wow.
Yeah, that's deep.
Well, Mark, in your role as an NLP practitioner, how can neuro-linguistic programming be applied to reframe the internal narratives of the men who suffer in silence, particularly those dealing with the emotional pain of children alienation?
Okay, great question. So for those that don't know, reframing is where we take a thought or a belief and we try and change it. We look at it from a different angle. So let's say somebody says, "I've failed." Another way of looking at it is there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So if we try to do something, like Thomas Edison with a light bulb failed, I believe it was 3,000 times, he believed he was just finding different ways that it didn't work. And if we look at it that way, that each time we do something and it doesn't work, that we learn something from it, it works really nicely. So to give you a couple of examples, we had a client a few years back. He'd built up a really successful business, and then through no fault of his own, it had gone bankrupt because of an outside force. And he ended up losing the cars and the house, and his kids were now living in a tiny little flat. And he came in and his belief was, "I am a failure." But again, we sat down with him and we mapped out how he started the business, all the challenges he went through, all the things that he'd learned, all the things he'd overcome. And within about 20 minutes, this guy realized he had a ton of skills and abilities and experience. And then he went away, and within 30 days, he'd started up another business, but just now made a rule that he wouldn't go near the thing that sort of destroyed his business before. And he's now more successful than he's ever been.
Wow.
So with alienation, again, it's, "I'm a failure, I don't know what to do." First things we say to people, is this permanent? Do we know in a year's time this situation is going to be the same? We ask what it is we can do to try and rebuild that relationship with the other parent. What resources have they got to do this? And it is really scary with reframing. It's such a simple little tool, but it can change how we feel. And just examining those thoughts and then thinking about them in different ways. What can I do? What have I learned? What is this teaching me? Now, interestingly, I'm starting to get back into Buddhism, and that's a big part of Buddhism is, what is this life lesson turning me, helping me to learn, and what can I do to change that instead?
Wow. That's pretty deep.
Okay. Yeah.
That is pretty deep, man.
10 years of this?
Yeah.
Wow, brother.
That's deep.
That's deep. About how many people would you say have you helped? And is it ever a case where it doesn't work? Or like what's... You know what I mean?
Okay. So I've been officially practicing as an NLP practitioner, hypnosis NLP for, it must be over 11 years. But I started at the age of 16 with severe anxiety, a really bad stammer, and really bad depression. And then I went on and started a mobile disco business full of confidence within 2 years, standing up and entertaining people, and built a business there. So it's amazing that that's helped me learning NLP, hypnosis, and nutritional skills. But then over the 10 years as a therapist, we've helped over 1,000. I've taken on 2 other therapists. Yes, it works. There's a bit of a difference. A lot of people think with hypnosis, you come in, you have one session and you're totally fixed. For some issues, that is true. Things like stop smoking and phobia, that can happen. But we use something else called self-directed neuroplasticity, which is the rule that the brain can rewire. So let's say somebody comes in with really severe anxiety. We know hypnosis will help, but then if we get them to practice that scan and act routine, where every hour they're pushing themselves into a much better, relaxed, in control state, that rewires the brain over 4 to 6 weeks. And for most of the anxiety and depressed clients we see, we get that sorted once and for all with usually 4 sessions and a couple of weeks of practice.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely was thinking it was a one and done.
So
Yeah,
Mark,
there's an
Richard,
awful lot.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a lot of therapists promise a one fixed cure, but if people are willing to put in a little bit of homework, the difference in success rates knocks it into the high 90s.
That's right.
So I actually have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
Now, you know how they say a therapist has a therapist. Is it the same in your field?
That a therapist has a therapist.
Right.
Yeah. Now, that's a really good point, because all the training courses I've gone on, half of the people in there are people who are trying to help themselves. Like me, that's how I got into this.
Right. That is
But
interesting, though.
There's a bit of an issue with a lot of guys that they don't like to ask for help. And a rule that I see of successful people is that they will go out and ask for help, especially successful business people. So myself and the guys we've got on the team is we usually have a session with one of the others one way each month to keep ourselves on track. Because there is a challenge that if we're sitting there all the time listening to people's problems, it can get us down. And just because we're therapists doesn't mean we're perfect. But on the other side, it does give us a lot of skills to handle with life better. So it's kind of, we've got an attitude. Now, when I went through parental alienation for the second time, thankfully a stranger saw I was struggling on a group I was on and just said, look, come on, let's get together and let's work together once a week. And that made a change.
Okay.
So it's never a case that we're sort of superhuman. It's a case we know when to ask for help, and that in turn helps people to be more successful.
That makes a lot of sense. And you know, and I always wondered this. You hear a lot of people say, a lot of doctors say that we only use like 7% capacity of our brain as far as the power that we have to be able to do things to you know, just like elevation. Is that correct?
It depends on which model you believe.
Okay.
I think, so if we look at the difference between the conscious and the unconscious mind, the unconscious mind is keeping our temperature right, it's keeping our heart beating, it's keeping us sitting up straight, where the NLP model says we're aware of about 8 conscious things at the minute. If I suddenly direct you to think about the temperature at the end of your big toe, you've dropped something else and picked something else in. But yeah, a lot of people say we use only about 5 or 7%. And it is interesting that when you see Buddhist monks really starting to meditate, they seem to be able to do extra things with their mind. And this is one of the things I like about good therapists, is they'll actually spend a bit of time each week with continuous professional development to learn something new, to do it better or faster. But it is amazing when we get into NLP especially, is it taught me a lot about what I did, the patterns that I have, and I can see a lot of patterns in other people, especially ex-partners. If I say this, they'll do that, and then if I do this, they'll do the other. So it is amazing how much more we can learn with a little bit of education.
Wow, Steve. That's deep.
Well, Mark, as a nutritional coach, what role does diet and nutrition play in alleviating the physical symptoms of stress and depression for men who are suffering in silence? And how might poor nutrition exacerbate their tendencies and internalizing struggles?
Okay, so it's very, very underrated in my view, in that when we've got mental health issues, you know, here in the UK, our doctors are not trained in nutrition. It's all about putting a sticking plaster over a wound. So for me, it's massive. So there's a lot of research been coming through lately to say the gut biome, the good bacteria and everything else in the gut really affects our mental health. They're now saying that we've got almost brain cells in the gut, and we use this 3-pronged sort of pillar effect with clients to get those results so quickly. So one of the ways that I look at it is that the brain and the gut produces 2 hormones called serotonin and melatonin, which to me are anti-anxiety hormones. They help us to sleep better, to feel relaxed, to feel calm. But if there's anything wrong in the digestive system, it can stop those hormones from being produced. So if we've got candida, that means if we've got a type of fungus in the gut that's at too high a level, that can stop melatonin and serotonin being produced. If we've got any digestive issues, if we've got gut biome problems, if our vitamins or minerals are low, if our digestive system's not producing the right enzymes and hydrochloric acid, that causes all of these problems. And sadly today, a lot of our nutrition comes from either people who are trying to sell us food or from these fatty diets. And a lot of people don't really know what a good diet is. And the way that we work is we get everybody tested. We call it an optimal health test, to see what's going on in the gut with the bloods and everything else. And then we'll tell them to remove the foods that are causing a problem. And sometimes people say to us, hey, I eat a healthy diet, but for some people, if they have an intolerance to tomatoes, that causes loads of inflammation in the gut and the brain, and that causes major issues. And then the other issue we see is that we're just eating an awful lot of processed food, things that haven't got high vitamins or minerals. Maybe we're not getting enough fiber. So just drinking fizzy drinks and artificial sweeteners and lots of sugars can really cause lots and lots of problems. And to give you an example, recently we had a client. She thought she ate a healthy diet, years of depression, hadn't been into work for 6 months. We got her tested and it was dairy products. And we took the dairy out. It took some persuasion. And she says she sat there one night and that depression just lifted and all the problems went away and she was straight back to work and feeling much better. So it can just be simple little things can make little differences, but try and eat a lot more fruit and veg, healthy amounts of meat, and putting it all in there massively can help, especially when it comes to those difficult depression cases.
Man.
Well, Mark, you said exactly what my doctor said. You know,
You've got a good doctor then.
and you know, it's funny because as you were talking, I was actually getting ready to lift up my soda here and take a sip. You said 50 drinks, and I said, I'm not going to do that. So thank you for that.
Well, Mark, you having personally overcome anxiety, depression, and alienation, what advice would you give men who are suffering in silence about the first steps towards seeking help and without feeling like they're admitting weakness?
So when it comes to alienation, just be aware that this can happen to anybody, male and female. It's usually just stress levels get too high within a relationship, and it doesn't mean you're weak or broken. It's just one of the things that happens in life. But the first thing I'd suggest is go and talk to some friends. The girls are really good at this. They do this naturally, but guys don't. They very rarely reach out, although we do see this changing now, is reach out to your friends, tell people how you feel, and it's certainly not a sign of weakness if you're feeling depressed, anxious, or stressed. And then the other thing we need to do is if we think we've got a serious problem and it's not getting better fast, is it's worth getting out and talking to a good therapist. And this is the challenge because there's two different models of therapy. There's the old type of therapy where you'd sit and talk about the problem again and again, and we know that strengthens the neural pathways, it causes the problem to get worse. But if we talk about ways that we can get better, ways to relax, taking some self-care, that can make such a difference. So it's finding a therapist that's looking how you want to feel instead rather than looking at the problems. But for most people, what I'd recommend is, first of all, get out and do some exercise every day. Usually we don't feel like it, but any sorts of sports, getting down the gym. Psychologists are now recommending forest bathing, which is getting out into the blues and the greens. I've just been out for a lovely walk this afternoon just before the rain came down, and to see all the autumnal colours and the wildlife was just fantastic. Doing things that you love, hobbies, spending time with friends, and just keep your mind busy and don't just focus on the problem. And then the big one, as I just mentioned, is start eating healthily. Educate yourself on diet. Avoid a lot of the fads. And we all need that little bit of self-care, especially as a therapist. If I'm going in tomorrow to work with a couple of suicides or depressives, I need to be in a great state before I go in. And I use all these tools I talk about myself to make sure when I go, I'm in a really good state and really at the top of my game.
Wow.
That's deep. I need a friend like you, Mark.
We have a friend.
Man, this sounds like men suffering in silence.
No, it definitely all makes sense, man. You know, especially when you were saying about getting out into the blues and greens. I actually like that. I'm going to take that saying, if you don't mind. Because I'm actually a city boy, right? New York City. But I love, everyone laughs at me because I love being out in open field, the woods, and wherever there's water, I'm there. You know, I just love getting away. And when I do get away, I love getting away to those environments. And I never understood really, but I just knew that I felt really peaceful in those environments.
It certainly makes a big difference. I'll give you an example. We went for a family outing a couple of months ago up to a lovely place in Northumberland. And as we were driving there were squabbles in the car. My stepdaughter had forgotten her phone charger and her phone was dying and she wanted to take loads of photos. And my partner was getting a bit grumpy. But when we got there and we got out, within 30 minutes of just walking in these woods and noticing the lakes and the wildlife, you could see everybody decompress.
Right.
And it's kind of partly disconnecting from all this internet activity and social media and just starting to notice. And the psychologists are saying the blues and the greens really do make a difference. But there's now studies saying that the trees and the plants are emitting all sorts of things that calm us down. Again, if we're exercising, we're producing loads of endorphins. And just doing that every day can make such a difference to the clients that we see.
Wow.
It's a lot of good information, man.
A lot of good information.
You know, a lot of good information, Mark. I appreciate that.
So, Mark, how does the intersection of mental health issues like anxiety and the experience of parental alienation contribute to men suffering in silence? And what therapeutic approaches do you recommend to address this dual challenge?
Okay. So, yes, certainly when we go through parental alienation, it's a type of trauma. It's extremely stressful, and it usually means that any of the mental health issues there are really exaggerated. It's one of the worst things I've seen through going through it. It can be worse than grief, because with grief, you get some closure after a while. But if you've got this problem of not seeing a child that you dearly love, and it drags on, and then you worry about it, it makes things far, far worse. So again, we use the mixture of NLP, hypnosis, anything that works, nutrition, and that we're saying to people, right, how do you want to be? How do you need to be to deal with this situation? And we don't tell them, we get them to tell us, because it's within everybody. So one of the best routines that we use is something I call the CEO routine. And this is where I'd get people to get up in the morning, get themselves a notepad, and sit down and write down 2 or 3 tasks that they need to do that day and give it a time. But then the next step is I say to them, how do you need to show up for you and the people around you to do these tasks well? And this is where people say calm, collective, in control, relaxed. And then we'll use whatever tool that works for them, whether it's NLP, hypnosis, to get them into that good mental state. And as I mentioned before, that scan and act routine where we use that positive revive, if we think about something we've done in the past that's really positive and makes us feel good, we quickly calm down and we change it. Do you want me to go through one? You guys can try it.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I like
Okay. So what I want you to do for me is just gently close your eyes.
Okay.
And I want you to think back to a time when you felt really happy, really confident, really relaxed. And what I want you to do is to think about 3 or 4 things you could see at that moment. You could notice the colors, people around you. And then I want you to think about 3 things you could hear at that time. Maybe loud sounds, quiet sounds, sounds in between. And then finally, I want you to think about how you felt, what your confidence was like, your energy, temperature of your body. And now I want you to ask yourself if these sights, sounds, and feelings, if they had a color, what color would it be?
Orange.
First one that comes to mind.
Green.
Blue.
I went green.
And if it had a shape, what shape would it be?
Round.
Rectangle.
Triangular.
And whereabouts does this shape and this color live in your body?
Does it live in my body?
I say heart.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Heart.
Okay. So keeping your eyes closed, I want you to focus on that color and that shape, wherever it lives in your body. Taking a gentle breath in through your nose. And I want you to imagine that you spin that color and that shape round and round for me. Spin it faster and faster as you breathe in through the nose. And as you spin that around, I want you to imagine that it begins to sparkle and glitter, getting brighter and stronger as it starts to expand all over your body, pushing that right up to the top of your head, down to the tips of your toes, and out to the tips of your fingers. And spin that faster and faster and just let that get into every muscle and every cell. Just push up that posture. Breathe in nice and gently. And just mentally make a note on a scale of 1 to 10 how strong that feeling is now. And then I want you to spin that round and round and push it right up to a 10. And give me a nod when you've done that. Good. And then just gently open your eyes. So how did that feel?
Interesting.
I'm not even gonna lie. It almost took me back to that time and place, like directly, like I was actually there. The only thing I didn't like is I couldn't get Roscoe's rectangle thing out of my head. Triangle. I couldn't get that. I don't know where that fit in.
I actually like the triangle spinning. I don't know. It
It
felt
was a
hard.
weird thing, right? It was in my spin thing.
I can actually see it spinning. I'm spinning it fast, and it felt like a shield almost. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
It was weird.
It's crazy, Mark.
So it's really interesting that usually our positive colors are bright light, purples, greens, blues, yellows. And it's really interesting that when we bring those colors back up and revivify that experience, it changes our posture, it changes our immune system. And we can do it with sights, sounds, music. There's certain music I have to turn down in the car because it makes me want to speed. It's just, we've got these mental states. And when we practice them, again, several times a day for a couple of weeks, it just means you can flick a switch in your head and you can go and do anything you want to do.
Wow.
And for me,
crazy.
it's really interesting. Mine is a day in the park with my little one after I hadn't seen her for about 6 months. It was just such a lovely day. But if you suddenly open a door and say, there's 1 million people to speak to now on a subject I know nothing about, I can flick that switch and stand up and talk with confidence where I used to be terrible with a stammer and awful anxiety. So learning to manage these mental states is not just done for mental health, it's done for sports. Sports people switch on these mental states really quickly. We just have different ways of doing that. So that's my favorite tool. I use that all the time with clients. And I've seen people go from struggling to doing extremely well with businesses, relationships, pay rises, just by learning to control what's going on in our mind.
So I actually have a question too, Mark. How do you feel about the medications that they have as far as to help with anxiety? Do you think that is more of a gimmick than anything, or do you think that, it's best to kind of do it naturally, to take a hold of it naturally?
If you can do it naturally, it's the best way to do it, because if you've got a problem, we need to know why. We don't need to go over the past again and again. But if we can learn to control our emotions, it takes away the problems with the side effects of those medications. My dad used to be a director of a psychiatric hospital, And there were lots of people in there who were shuffling and drooling after years of serious medication. The other challenge with low-level problems is that we take that medication and the body gets used to it, and they have to up the dose or give you something more severe. But the way we prefer to do it is to fix the problem once and for all, and then you don't have to come back for years of therapy. But some of those medications do have serious side effects. However, with some people who have serious problems, medication's the best way to go. But for 99% of the clients we work with, we don't use medication at all. And those that are on it can quickly come off it as long as they go back to the doctor and do it in the right way.
That is interesting.
Wow.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Listen, well, I think we just kind of did my next question, but we did an example. I wanted to do an example of it, but we kind of did it right there. So let me jump into someone who's integrated multiple disciplines like NLP and nutrition into mental health support. What holistic strategies do you suggest for men suffering in silence to build resilience against ongoing stress and depression or child alienation?
So, again, create nice social groups. We've got lots of little groups popping up for people to go and do woodwork and talk about the problems. So social groups is important. Again, getting out into fresh air, forest bathing, eating a healthy diet, but things like meditation, mindfulness. Now, one of my favorites is something called self-hypnosis. And this is where you learn to put yourself into trance, but before it, you give yourself an intention of a small change you want to make that day. So for me, years ago, I couldn't say anything beginning with the word S or K. But I really wanted to get over this stammer, and it was just I stood up and I sort of self-hypnotized to be able to talk calmly and positively, and that worked really nicely. And then I went on to work to practice to be a disc jockey, which was loads of fun, and I did it again. It took me 2 years to do this on my own, and then I went on and got into public speaking. So it's about pushing yourself into something new, doing some positive habits, getting into self-hypnosis. We've got a free little self-hypnosis track if anybody wants it. But most of all, go and talk to people. Don't do it in silence, although that might be the natural thing that men do. I mean, it's a great idea for a podcast, this. So many guys just get into problems and don't go and ask for help. And I remember, some years ago, I had a lovely guy came in and he just sat on the couch and stared at me. He was terrified. But this guy was built like I've never seen anybody built. And when I sat with this guy, we just went through and found all of his skills. This guy just put all of his time into helping other people, keeping people off drugs and off the streets. And when he sort of realized he's got all these skills and abilities, he realized he had what he needed to beat his anxiety and his depression.
Wow. And that's one of the reasons why we started this show, because well, so many guys just have a hard time admitting that they have an issue. They look at it like weakness.
Yeah. We were those guys.
We are. That's right.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting time we've got now because there's so much stress from the minute we get up and we're looking at that mobile phone and all the craziness in the world.
Right.
But again, we do need help and we need to take care of ourselves, because if we're taking care of... That was one of the big things when I got alienated from my youngest daughter, was the therapist who helped me, he turned around and said, look, you're focusing all on your daughter, but who are the other people that you support in your life? And when I looked at that bigger picture, there's loads of family we were helping and supporting and clients. And if I'd just gone down that rabbit hole of just focusing on that problem, that would have meant that support would have gone for an awful lot of people.
Right.
So we need to look after ourselves. And that's another really big thing, by the way, guys. There's an expression, if in doubt, help someone out. And if you go and volunteer with a charity, become a mentor for somebody, do something good for the community, it's amazing how good that makes you feel.
That is true.
I agree.
Mark, you have been absolutely great, man. This has been so informative.
Yes.
Can you please tell our listeners how to get a hold of you, where your pages are, everything? And we're going to list it as well, but still, just let them know.
That's really kind of you. Yeah, so if somebody would like some free anxiety and depression tools and resources, if they go to escapeanxietynow.com, right on the front page, we've got an anxiety relief pack, which includes a self-hypnosis track that you can sit and listen to every day. There's a an anxiety ebook, which gives you some practical tips and help, and it's got some breathing exercises as well. And then once you're on that mailing list, we can send you some other things out, or you can go onto the little contact us page, and if you've got a specific problem, I can direct you off to some tools that'll help. You can also find us at newcastle-hypnotherapy.com for our separate little hypnotherapy business.
Wow.
That's great, Mark.
We thank you so
I
much.
appreciate that.
You
Yeah.
really do. Yeah, I'm actually
Yeah.
going to log on after the show.
And I really am too.
Yeah.
I want to try that again with that train. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it's a weird, strange feeling there.
It was good stuff. You know, Mark, we definitely want to thank you for coming on our platform, man. And we want to be able to stay in touch with you and maybe from time to time have you on, you know, some more so we can talk, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, anytime you want, just give me a shout.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Definitely. We'll do that soon. Once again, I am Roscoe Squeezeoff.
Lucky, let them know.
And your boy Richie B.
And we are
Men,
Suffer in Silence. Till next
Appreciate you,
time.
Mark. Peace.
Bye now.
Well, we
Thank
gotta-
you, Mark. Man,
gotta-
that was, man, let me tell you, that is awesome, man.
Yeah, it was awesome. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I